We are right now in the beginning of a climate and ecological crisis, and we need to call it what it is, an emergency. We must acknowledge that we do not have the situation under control, and that we don't have all the solutions yet, unless those solutions mean that we simply stop doing certain things. We must admit that we are losing this battle. We have to acknowledge that the older generations have failed. All political movements in their present form have failed. But Homo sapiens have not yet failed. Yes, we are failing, but there is still time to turn everything around. We can still fix this. We still have everything in our own hands. But unless we recognize the overall failures of our current systems, we most probably don't stand a chance. We are facing a disaster of unspoken sufferings for enormous amounts of people, and now is not the time for speaking politely or focusing on what we can or cannot say. Now is the time to speak clearly. Solving the climate crisis is the greatest and most complex challenge that Homo sapiens have ever faced. The main solution, however, is so simple that even a small child can understand it. We have to stop our emissions of greenhouse gases, and we either do that or we don't. We say that nothing in life is black or white, but that is a lie, a very dangerous lie. Either we prevent a 1.5 degree of warming, or we don't. Either we avoid setting off that irreversible chain reaction beyond human control, or we don't. Either we choose to go on as our civilization, or we don't. That is as black or white as it gets, because there are no gray areas when it comes to survival. Now we all have a choice. We can create transformational action that will safeguard the living conditions for future generations, or we can continue with our business as usual and fail. That is up to you and me. And yes, we need a system change rather than an individual change, but you cannot have one without the other. If you look throughout history, all of the big changes in society have been started by people at the grassroots level. People like you and me. So I ask you to please wake up and make the changes required possible. Do your best is no longer good enough. We must all do the seemingly impossible. Today, we use about 100 million barrels of oil every single day. And there are no politics to change that. There are no rules to keep that oil in the ground. So we can no longer save the world by playing by the rules, because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change, and it has to start today. So everyone out there, it is now time for civil disobedience. It is time to rebel. What do we want? Climate action! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate action! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Climate action! When do we want it? Katie, do you know who was the other side? No more oil! Keep the carbon in the soil!
Alright, so, Ani Kinawiya. Hello everyone! It's so amazing to be here with you today on this beautiful day. Chimigwech, thank you so much for being here today and joining the thousands of people around the world marching to end fossil fuels. I don't know about you, but I'm passionate about climate justice, and it feels so nice to be here and share this passion with you all. I will introduce myself in the Ojibwe language that has been spoken here for millennia. Shaelyn Wabegijig Indijinakas, Nanode Wizawin Temiskaming Donjaba, Atikin Dodem, Minjikaning Indonjaba, Minwa, Anishinaabe, Algonquin, German, Irish, and Dao. So in my language, I said, my name is Shaelyn Wabegijig. My family are from Temiskaming First Nation, Caribou Clan. I'm from here, Minjikaning. I grew up here, and I'm Algonquin, German, and Irish. And I moved to Minjikaning when I was 10 years old. I lived and went to school on the reserve with my stepdad and little sister's family, the Naganash family. I hope to give back to this community as much as it has given to me. I will always do my best to be a good relative and stand in solidarity with them, and I invite you to do the same. I'm going to share about the history of Rama First Nation from their perspective provided on their website, so we can all have a greater understanding of and connection to this land that we're gathered on. This is Ojibwe, or Chippewa territory. They are referred to as Ojibwe in English and Chippewa in French, and are part of the larger Anishinaabe nation, same as my Algonquin people. This territory has been called the gathering place, where travelers rested, great meetings were held, and important agreements were made. Rama First Nation is also known as Minjikaning, which means the fish fence at the Narrows, whose abundance of food made it the perfect gathering place in summer settlement. The Chippewas of Rama First Nation were originally part of a larger community known as the Chippewas of Lake Simcoe and Lake Huron. Around 1830, the community was forcibly moved to the Coldwater Narrows area by the Crown to farm the land as part of an experiment which shaped Indian reserves in North America and around the world. Following this experiment, they continued clearing the land for Highway 12, establishing farms, mills, and markets. Also in the 1830s, on behalf of the Crown, the Lieutenant Governor Colburn Street, set aside almost 10,000 acres for the nation between Atherley Narrows and Coldwater. But in 1836, Ojibwe chiefs signed a document that they understood would provide title to the land, but instead it was a surrender which gave up those reserve lands. This land was taken in what is now called an illegal surrender. At that point, the large community was separated into 3 First Nations, now known as the Chippewas of Beausoleil First Nation, the Chippewas of Georgina Island, and the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, 10 kilometers from here. They later formed the Chippewa Tri-Council and continue their alliance today. In 2012, the Chippewa Tri-Council settled a claim with the federal government for the Coldwater Narrows land. It was the largest settlement in Canadian history at the time. They also signed the Southern Ontario Treaties and the Williams Treaties. As you probably know, they have surrendered lands and signed treaties, sometimes under false pretenses or promises, but regardless, they are still responsible for the land, protectors of water and sustainers of life. Their connection and responsibilities go beyond surrenders, treaties, settlement, invisible borders, and property law. Now that we have a common understanding of history, I invite you to consider your own history and relationship to this land. If we are not Ojibwe, then we are guests here, and we can all be part of the solution in nation-to-nation relationship building. We can honor this relationship by learning and respecting Ojibwe law, including thinking 7 generations ahead. Our actions today will have consequences far into the future. When making important decisions, we also consider Nikanagana, or all my relations, referring to all living beings as our relatives who offer themselves to us and who we must take care of in return, from the smallest fish to the biggest moose. Who we are as Anishinaabe peoples comes from the land. Our languages, our cultural practices, our legal systems, and our ways of living all emerge from our territories. Climate chaos has significantly impacted our ability to live as Anishinaabe because we follow the land. The land tells us when it's time for harvesting food and medicines, time for ceremony and other cultural practices on the land, like making baskets and mats from our tree relatives. Our identity is tied to these traditions, and all of it is in jeopardy. We must acknowledge that the root cause of the climate crisis is colonialism and capitalism. We must also see that there is a different way to live as humans on Mother Earth. Indigenous ways of governing and organizing society are the original ways of living in harmony and balance with the Earth and sustainability. We cannot have climate justice without Indigenous justice, and we must make room for Indigenous leadership. September 30th is National Truth and Reconciliation Day, a day to learn the truth about what has happened and continues to happen to our people and lands. We all need to be informed and educated so that together we can create a new way forward in peace and harmony with each other, all our relations, and the territory that we call home. There are 3 actions that I invite you to do to support this movement in your life. On September 30th, wear orange. Go to your local Truth and Reconciliation event. Here in Orillia, it's from 1 to 3 p.m., and we march from the library again to Lions Oval Public School grounds. Number 2, educate yourself on Indigenous perspectives, teachings, and truths. Learn more about the real history of this land and the local treaties that we are all subject to. We are all treaty people. Number 3, connect and listen to the earth and her waters. Learn about the trees, plants, and animals, and build relationships with them. Doing these 3 things will make you a good human, a good guest, a good relative, and a good future ancestor. So for the sake of our existence on this planet, for future generations, we need to transition to a better way of life and end fossil fuels!
Can Christina come up here as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up here.
Can you turn it up? Christina? We're going in this order. So it's Christina and Shaelyn. So maybe Shaelyn.
Yeah, get pictures of this. This is
Sorry.
Today, atmospheric CO2 is at about 419 parts per million, or ppm. For reference, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere should not exceed 350 parts per million.
My name is Christina, and I was born at 360 parts per million.
My name is Shaelyn, and I was born at 362 parts per million.
My name is Max, and I was born at 366 parts per million.
My name is Madeleine, and I was born at 368 parts per million.
My name is Kate, and I was born at 382 parts per million.
My name is Yiming, and I was born at 385 parts per million.
My name is Elora, and I was born at 386 parts per million.
To remind you, today, atmospheric CO2 is at about 419 parts per million, or ppm. For reference, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere should not exceed 350 parts per million. Fridays for Future, the youth-led climate movement, began in August 2018 when Greta Thunberg, a Swedish teenager, started skipping school every Friday to sit outside the Swedish parliament in Stockholm with a sign that read, "School Strike for Climate." She did this to protest the lack of action on climate change and demand stronger climate policies from her government. Greta Thunberg's solo protest quickly gained attention and inspired other young people around the world to join her in similar strikes and demonstrations. The movement gained momentum and came to be known as Fridays for Future. Young activists across the globe began organizing school strikes and climate protests on Fridays, emulating Greta's example. Since its inception, Fridays for Future has grown into a global movement with participants from many countries and has risen to one of the largest youth movements in history. Today, we are a part of the global march to end fossil fuels with climate marches in over 400 cities across the world and over 50 cities in Canada. The scale of this mobilization and the urgency of the moment underscore the devastating impacts of our recent record-breaking heat, deadly floods, wildfires, and other extreme weather events. Our action is entirely youth-led and has been organized by a committee of over 15 young people in our community.
A little right there. All right. Hi, everybody. So my name's Max. Oh no. My name is Max, and I can't get my phone too close to the thing. It's real mad.
It's as stable as their policies.
So my name is Max. I'm the vice president of Lake Country Pride, and I'm also a psychotherapist. And one of the big themes I've seen in my own life and my work in the last few months, and I think it's really relevant here, is the accountability and really assigning blame in the right spots. We are so prone to blaming ourselves, especially if you're someone who's really empathetic, who cares so much about other people and the world and corporations and industries and government. They take advantage of this because it's so much easier to blame the individual than it is to blame the system. It's so much easier to say, if the system isn't working for you, it's your fault. If you are struggling in the system, it's your fault. If you don't like the way things are run, it's your fault. Get over it. And at the end of the day, this is a distraction tactic, because if we're so busy pointing fingers at ourselves and at other people, we're not looking at the system. It's so much easier to say you personally need to reduce your carbon footprint than it is to say that we need to fundamentally change the system, that we need to change how we rely on fossil fuels, that we need to change how we rely on the exploitation of people and of resources. And I'm not saying that these personal steps we can take in our lives aren't important. They are. It's great. If you can support local, that's wonderful. If you can go reusable, that's great. But gotta breathe. A lot of sand, one breath. But if you can support local, if you can do reusable, that's great. But with the very limited energy we have, after just trying to survive in a system that seems to want the opposite for us, we really have to remember where the fight is and where our energy is best spent. Is it best spent nitpicking our own lives, or is it better spent pushing for systemic change? We should not have to compensate for a system that at every opportunity is pushing us to make unsustainable choices. And I know that I personally have felt that guilt of feeling like I personally do not do enough. Like if I were just to make these drastic changes in my own life, then somehow that would fix things. And that's a really useful narrative for the people who love the status quo, who benefit from it, who profit from it. And if we want to really make meaningful, sustainable change, we need to focus on where the policies are and the people are who are really creating these problems and maintaining these problems. We need to hold the perpetrators accountable instead of blaming the victims. And I'm going to pass it over to Elora now to talk about some of those systemic changes we're looking for.
The Global March to End Fossil Fuels has 6 clear demands. 1. No new fossil fuels. No new finance, public or private. No new approvals, licenses, permits, or extensions. The provision of sufficient consensual climate funding to realize this commitment everywhere. 2. A rapid, just, and equitable phase out of existing infrastructure in line with the 1.5 Celsius temperature limit and a global plan like a fossil fuel treaty to ensure that each country does its part. 3. New commitments for international cooperation to drastically scale up financial and technology transfers to ensure renewable energy access, economic diversification plans, and just transition processes, so that every country and community can phase out fossil fuels. 4. Stop greenwashing and claiming that offsets, CCS, carbon capture and storage, or geoengineering are solutions to the climate crisis. 5. Hold polluters responsible for the damage they've caused and make sure it's coal, oil, and gas corporations that pay reparations for climate loss and damage and for local rehabilitation, remediation, and transition. 6. 6. End fossil fuel corporate capture. No to corporations writing the rules of climate action, bankrolling climate talks, or undermining the global response to climate change.
So, how does all this connect to the federal government? Christina's holding a sign with our beloved Justin Trudeau. According to Environment Canada, Canada's climate is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world. Canada signed the Paris Agreement in 2016 and committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. However, many research groups have rated Canada's climate target, policies, and climate finance as highly insufficient overall, indicating that Canada's climate policies and commitments are not consistent with the Paris Agreement, with the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit. Notably, fossil fuel companies are increasing production and blocking climate action.
Shame.
They've got our government in their pocket. The fossil fuel industry lobbies or meets with Canadian government officials 100 times each month or more to ask for more funds and continued expansion.
Shame.
Yeah, it does. We also see the Canadian government complicit in the face of extractive resource projects on unceded Indigenous land, such as the Coastal GasLink pipeline currently under construction in northern British Columbia, which cuts through the heart of Wet'suwet'en territory and violates their laws and right to self-determination.
Shame.
Even closer to home in Ontario, you can see Doug Ford there, the situation is even worse. So I'm going to pass it over to Shaelyn to speak about the Ontario government.
Can we move first?
Hi again. Okay. I am one of 7 young people who are taking the Ontario government to court for rolling black Thank you. Too much. So I'm taking the Ontario government to court with 6 other young people for rolling back their climate ambition in this province. In 2018, the Ontario government enacted a law and replaced relatively progressive emission reduction targets for the province with a single scientifically inadequate target for 2030. We argue that these actions violate all Ontarians' charter rights for life, liberty, and security because it contributes dangerous levels of greenhouse gases to an already taxed atmosphere. Climate change impacts us all, but young people and Indigenous peoples are especially at risks of the climate harms that we will see in our lifetime. That is why I and the 6 other young people involved in the case are determined to keep fighting for a safer future, not just for us, but for all generations to come. So right now we're headed to the Ontario Court of Appeal in January, and whatever happens there, we'll probably be headed to the Supreme Court. We'll see, but yeah, keep following along. Follow Eco Justice. They do all of the legal work for us. They're amazing. And then I have 3 examples of how the provincial government is moving full speed ahead with the oil and gas industry. Number 1, they're planning 2 highways, as you know. So the first highway will contribute 87,000 tons of CO2 per year for the Holland March Highway, also known as the Bradford Bypass, and then 700,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year for Highway 413. Shame. And then number 2, they're expanding gas plants. The government has separately awarded contracts for 4 new natural gas facilities, the first new gas plants in over a decade. Come on. And number 3, removing land from the green belt, as we all know. They're removing land from the Greenbelt to build urban sprawl and gas-powered, vehicle-dependent communities in what is supposed to be a protected green area, space for farmland, forests, wetlands, and watersheds. Shame on them. Shame!
Okay, let's turn it over to our municipal government, also known as Orillia City Council. Do you want to hold up this one, Christina?
Yeah, Christina.
Shout out, Christina.
Whoa.
Okay, so here are our 9 members of Orillia City Council. We have, I think we have 3 members of council here today. Do you want to come up? No? Okay, they're sitting. Yeah, Jay, do you want to come? Okay, we got Ward 3 City Councilor Jay Follis. And then chilling on the grass behind you, we've got Ward 1 Councilor David Campbell and Ward 4 Councilor Janet Lindernford. Okay, so right here in our community, the city of Orillia has officially adopted in principle its climate change action plan entitled Orillia's Climate Future. The plan targets net zero emissions for corporate operations by 2040 and net zero emissions for the community by 2050. This plan serves as a roadmap for climate action decision-making and priority setting in the city of Orillia over the next 30 years and sets ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets. It is the responsibility of all of us to monitor progress and hold our local government accountable. I'm going to pass it over to Kate to end us off.
Finally, we thought we would end with some good climate news from this year. 1, the state of California has become the largest economy in the world to endorse the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which calls for quickly and equitably phasing out fossil fuels. Oil and gas lobbyists tried to block the resolution, but the vote passed 43 to 16. It is predicted that this resolution will have a huge effect on other endorsements in the coming months. 2. 7 EU member states just saw their lowest use of fossil fuels on record for the first half of 2023. We are starting to see a very promising trend of coal, oil, and gas on a steady decline, while the uptake of renewable energy is growing drastically. Number 3. In Ecuador, a huge oil drilling project in nearly 4,000 square miles of the Amazon rainforest has been rejected by nearly 60% of voters. The Ecuadorian president does advocate for oil drilling, but the people have spoken, which means that this is yet another oil company that will have to cease operations. Number 4. In a historic win, 16 young people sued the state of Montana for violating their state constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment by promoting fossil fuel projects and ignoring climate change. The judge overseeing their case ruled in their favor. It sets a precedent for future climate lawsuits across the country. Like this one! Across the world, we are demonstrating the power of people. Our campaigning and advocating is causing so much noise that it's impossible for our leaders to ignore us. Let's continue to educate ourselves, stay informed, stay politically engaged, and stay connected with local groups fighting for change, such as Green Orillia and the Sustainable Orillia Youth Council. Together, we can build a fossil fuel-free future.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We have a clipboard that Jacob's going to pass around to sign up for the Green Orillia newsletter. Stay involved with future actions. He's over there. Please sign up and follow Sustainable Orillia Youth Council and Green Orillia on social media and join future actions. Take pictures with your signs, post it online, show that you were here, and let's keep up the pressure.